All right, Nick, let's talk about the Los Angeles Rams as the first, let's say, phase of free agency has wound down. We're starting to see a collection of what teams have done in free agency, and I think the Los Angeles Rams, they've done a lot of really good stuff. Now, while they weren't a team that went out and got 100 players in free agency, they did a very good job in selecting who they did get to bring them in and ultimately benefit this team, strengthen a lot of key weaknesses this team had. And I think there's a lot of really good data to break down to show exactly what they're able to accomplish with some of these additions they made. Before we dive into all that, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, let's jump straight on into it. First, I'm going to bring up a chart just showing what the Los Angeles Rams has done to this point in free agency. We see they obviously, everybody knows they're able to retain, restructure Matthew Stafford. They also brought back Jimmy Garoppolo at the quarterback position. And then as far as bringing new talent to this team, Devontae Adams, that's the big one. That's the one everybody is talking about. But these next three guys, I think they're more under the radar guys that people maybe aren't seeing how much value they bring to this team. That's Poona Ford, Coleman Shelton, and Laryl Murchison. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry if it is not. And now I have a chart here to show just exactly how much value these guys bring to the table when we're talking about the Los Angeles Rams. Before I go into that, though, I want to highlight a few things. The key deficiencies on this Rams team from last year are pass blocking, which in per PFF, they were graded out at a 53.7. Their run defense, which also necessarily wasn't that great, 67.8 there. And then you look at their tackling as well, a 46.3 tackling grade, which is actually pretty bad. So now let's go over to the chart that I have showing the guys they brought in and what they bring to the table here. So first up, let's talk about Coleman Shelton. As I said here, the Rams 2024 grade for pass blocking is a 53.7. They bring in Coleman Shelton, a guy who isn't, like two-year, $12 million deal. Nothing crazy for him, but his pass blocking grade is very good. A 68.4 pass blocking grade for Coleman Shelton. And that's a value in addition of 14.7 points in the pass blocking department, better than what the Rams were last year. So this guy, he instantly helps bring that pass blocking grade up. And I think that's something really important for this Rams team, what they've done so far. Let's go to the next one. This was actually their lowest graded, attribute for last season in 2024. The tackling grade of 46.3. Laryl Murchison comes in here with a tackling grade of 62.8, the highest value they've brought in for the difference between the delta between their initial tackling grade and what he brings to the table, and that's a positive of 16.5 points that he brings to the table above where they were last year. A pretty big upgrade in that department. And then finally, Poona Ford, I'd say the best of the worst. Run defense, they were decent, 67.8, but Poona Ford, ridiculous when it comes to run defense. A 78.8 for him. He's still able to bring 11 points of value per PFF ratings to the table for this Rams run defense. So I think overall here, the message that I'm seeing, the point that I'm trying to get at here for the Los Angeles Rams is that this team has done a great job. When you look at what I would consider the lower tier players, it's not your Devontae Adams, it's not re-signing Matthew Stafford in free agency. They had a plan. They went out and they got guys that directly affected the lower portions or the worst grades they had across the board and helped themselves get better there. And I think that was a really genius idea for Les Snead, Sean McVay, this Rams team in general. Really great job by them in this free agency period with what they've done. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick, before we get to you, Rams fans, in the comments section below. As I alluded to, the first period or so of free agency kind of slowed down. We get to take time and look at what all the Rams have done as a whole. What do you grade this Rams free agency? The first part, everything they've brought to the table here. All these guys they've brought, Matthew Stafford bringing him back, Jimmy Garoppolo bringing him back as well. Give it a grade. Is it an A? Do you love it? Is it a C? Just mediocre? Not so sure. You want to see how it unfolds? Or is it an F? You hate it and you wish they would have done something completely different? Let us know in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, I'm done talking, going through all of that. I want to hear What were your thoughts here on everything talking Rams?
So these are big statistical jumps. First of all, when you talk about double-digit improvements, that's huge. PFF, of course, they do a great job. When you break down the structure of how most of their rankings go, it's usually 10-point increments. So if you're, let's say you're in the 60s, right? That's usually starter, right? Replacement level player. 70s is a good solid player. 80s is like a star Pro Bowler. 90s is like Hall of Fame stuff. Aaron Donald consistently graded in the 90s, for example. So that delta of 10 points between, let's say, 60 something and a 70 something is the difference between a quality starter and a solid replacement level player. So when you see those improvements right there, those three double digits values that you highlight in your chart, that's significant. That's not a small thing to just throw away. That's a pretty big jump, especially when you look at the major deficiencies on the Rams, like you highlighted. Pass blocking was by far the worst. They were 30th in the NFL on pass blocking grade in 2024. Now, a large part of that, of course, was the numerous amount of injuries they dealt with early parts of the season, but there were some late season concerns. I look at young center Bo Limmer. We did a film review on him. He's a feisty guy. He may have a bright future. The reality is, in the pass protection game, he was really a liability. He graded out as a 40.2 according to PFF. So bringing Coleman Shelton back, who of course went to Chicago after being with the Rams for a number of years, really did some good things on a bad Bears offense. I'm excited to see what he does back in Los Angeles. That's an immediate like 28, 30-point upgrade at that position alone. That's a huge boost and hopefully a healthier 2025. If you look at this entire Rams offensive line, we're going to see a PFF grade go from 30th in the NFL to top half easily, which they obviously need to be because you look at an older Matthew Stafford. He never was the most mobile guy in the world to begin with. He's definitely going to be more constrained now that he's in the last few seasons of his career. Need a quality offensive line when it comes to pass protecting to make his job as easy as possible. Now, when you look at the run defense grade and the tackling grade, they ranked according to PFF. They were 18th in tackling and 15th in run defense. I had it written down right here. So they weren't exactly terrible in those areas, but they were reasons for improvement, especially when you consider how good they are in the front seven and getting after the passer. Obviously, look at guys like Fisk, Verse, Young, right, Turner. They are really good at getting to the quarterback. They just need to not be, they just need to not have issues stopping the run in big moments. And look, we saw that against the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoff game, right? We saw Barkley with a long run. We saw Hurts with a long run. That's the one thing that can't happen. That's the one weakness on this Rams defense outside of giving up big plays in the secondary that could really constrain them in the future. They've done some good things, and we'll talk about that in the future about what they've done in the secondary this offseason. But really, bringing Impuna forward, and we covered it when it happened, was a major steal because it turns a little bit below average run defense in the Los Angeles Rams to a top 10 run defense. You see that 10-point upgrade on the chart you showed overnight. Puna Ford's one of the more underrated players in all the National Football League. He's done a lot of great things every single stop he's made. He's going to come in and slide in perfectly. He doesn't even have to play a lot, just run downs, first downs, things like that. Keeps Kobe Turner fresh, keeps Fisk fresh, gets teams in a long yardage situation, unleash the pass rushers, and then they just wreck shop, right? This is just to kind of surmise here. This is an incredible job by the Rams front office, by Les Snead, recognizing these are our key deficiencies, going out and addressing them in a way that provided the value and doing it without breaking the bank. There are a lot of teams, in order to make 10, 15-point jumps at a certain position, they have to reset the entire market. The Rams have done it with a lot of solid, doesn't really make the headlines, almost unremarkable moves, but they will have huge benefits to this organization in the short, medium, and long term because, again, they're not mortgaging their future. They solve their biggest problems at great prices with team friendly contracts.
Yeah, Nick, and I think that's the key here is what the Rams they got to do going forward. This is a team, and I think practicing make this a best practice going forward is going to really pay off for them because you look at this team now, it's very young. They've got a lot of young stars on this team. That means people are going to have to get paid. So when those contracts start to add up, you're going to start to see more and more salary cap going away. Not going to have the ability to make those Devontae Adams level signings, to go out and make those kind of big signings. So if the Rams can get into their best practice of let's bring in, quality, efficient signings that help us, address a deficiency on this team because we're going to be good with all of these stars and, having the contracts. That's the thing. You're going to have good players. You're going to have star power at different positions across the board. So they can come in here and just really key in, hey, we were bad here. This guy maybe isn't the best player, but he's really good at this one thing, and it helps us out somewhere we're deficient. I think that's a good strategy. We're already seeing it here. I really think it's going to help them out this coming season, but it's going to be more important in the future when they start to sign these big time contracts.
Yeah, especially whenever the quarterback situation rears its ugly head and Stafford decides to hang it up. And then what are the Rams going to do there? It means they're going to have to really rely on these young guys on defense and really some on offense as well, stepping up. And you need to have the infrastructure in place to do that. And that's exactly what the Rams have done here. Let's say this is Matthew Stafford's last season. They're still set up to have a really good front seven on defense and a really good offensive line, even beyond Matthew Stafford. So whoever replaces him, I don't know if it's going to be Garoppolo. They'll probably go out and get somebody else, maybe draft somebody. We'll have to wait and see when that moment comes. But the Rams are building themselves up again, really doing an incredible job here for the short, medium, and long term. What's so abnormal with what the Los Angeles has done, really going back to the past couple of seasons, is that they've found this way to be really good in the short term and not mortgage the medium term future with salary cap, but also creating the infrastructure in the place for some future developments, a future quarterback or something like that. That is really hard to do, folks. You look at these are very team friendly deals. They address key areas on this team at pivotal positions. We're talking front seven here, right? We're not talking the flashy, wide receiver or something like that. They made that move, of course, off Cup and onto Devontae Adams. But if you look at where they spent most of their time and most of their effort and most of their energy once the new league year kicked off, it's in the trenches. And that's how the Rams have been focused ever since they made that crazy offseason a few years ago where they added a bunch of veterans and went all in, of course, when they added Matthew Stafford to the fold. Ever since that moment, they have been the most heavily winning the trenches, front seven offensive line team in the National Football League, right? People give the Philadelphia Eagles a lot of credit, and rightly so. They've done a lot of that too. But the Rams in recent years, they've been better than Philly. Philly had a lot of veterans. You're looking at Kelsey and Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham, all those guys. The Rams are a much more younger team, but I guarantee you they're going to be like the Philadelphia Eagles in terms of going to, again, I should say, because the Rams won a Super Bowl a few years ago. They're going to be going to these big games and winning up front with the offensive and defensive lines. They've done a great job focusing on that, and they continue to do so. I love the fact that they're sticking to this plan. Again, it's great for the short term. It solves the weaknesses like you highlighted, but it also creates the infrastructure in place for long-term success. And that I will lead now to you, Mize, for a question to kind of put a final bow on this. Where do the Rams go from here in terms of free agency or the draft, in terms of what's one more thing you think they need to focus on? Is it just DB? Do they need more help in the secondary? And is that it? I mean, you just get secondary help and then you're good?
I think secondary help is something important. They have sufficient, and we're going to cover this probably later on. They've got sufficient guys there that I think for the season will be okay. There definitely needs to be a more future based approach to it. But also, one thing I think of when I see this Rams team, and it's the left side of the line is really good, but the right side of this line, some of the guys are getting a little bit older. Havstein's going to be 33 here soon. I think maybe to keep the train going, they could look to see if they could get any steals at the offensive line, focus on the trenches. We look at the defensive line, everybody's super young. They've got a lot of really young guys on that side of the ball. I think it's not a bad idea to go in here and say, hey, let's maybe, if we can get a second, third round guy that's a solid offensive lineman that we can grow, develop, and bring in the future, when we have to make a tough decision, letting one of these older guys go, I think that's a way that we're going to see them go into the draft as well. So I do think secondary, that's a big one. That's a key one because they're just okay for right now. They don't really have any future aspirations there. But offensive line is also somewhere that they might want to look.